Low-income tenants in Staten Island, New York are shocked and surprised when their landlord filed eviction against them for only $5,000 in back rent due. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting story for you today, and it's coming out of Staten Island, New York, right, which is part of New York City. So there's these low-income tenants, and they are shocked and surprised that their landlord is filing eviction against them for only $5,000 in rent due. Okay, talk about ridiculous. These tenants, they have no concept of how much money $5,000 is, apparently, because they're so used to the government paying their bills for them, or from getting rent subsidies due to rent control, that they just don't have a concept that $5,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money to pretty much every landlord out there. So yes, a landlord will file an eviction against you for only being a month or two behind rent when you owe $5,000. Okay, it's a lot of money, and you need to pay it. You need to pay your rent because you signed a contract saying that you would do so. Now, obviously, all the people who have these evictions filed against them, they're not going to be evicted. Some of them, they're going to, have the government pay the portion that they still owe, be it through rental assistance programs or whatever government subsidies they use. Some of them will work out deals with their landlord, etc., right? But, it just really, when I saw this story, it just kind of was like, man, this shows you the kind of entitlement that these, socialist tenants have. They're all sitting there and they depend on the government. They depend on someone else to pay their bills for them. And they are shocked and surprised when that doesn't happen, suddenly you might be thrust back out into reality. The reality of a capitalist system that doesn't rely upon other people to pay your bills for you. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So for those of you out there who have tenants who are receiving, rental assistance or Section 8 or something like that, have you noticed that these tenants seem to be a little bit more entitled than your regular tenants? I've noticed that, okay? I've noticed that there's this sense of entitlement. Like they're doing you a favor by you getting that voucher, when in my opinion, it's the exact opposite of that. But anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. This article is coming from thegothamist.com, and it says, on Staten Island, 2 months of back rent can end in eviction. Yeah, well, in the rest of the country, 1 month of back rent can end in eviction, So it would be nice if they just faced reality, and that's the way things should be. But anyway, let's get into it. The owner of a large housing complex in New York, Staten Island, is carrying out more evictions than any other landlord in the borough, with dozens of tenants, including many with rent subsidies, receiving removal notices over a few $1,000s in missed payments. Renova Properties, a subsidiary of the real estate behemoth Camabees International Group, filed 169 eviction cases against tenants at Tyson's Park Apartments since a statewide freeze on most removals ended in January of 2022, according to records tracked by Gothamist. In at least 23 instances identified by Gothamist, the landlord took low-income tenants to court over portions of their rent that were supposed to be covered by a voucher administered by the Department of Social Services. So regardless of whether the rent is coming from the tenant or coming from this social welfare provider, right? If all of the rent is not paid, then we have to file eviction against the tenant. That is, just that it's a smart business decision, okay? There's no telling if you're ever going to get the rest of that rent payment from this social welfare provider. Maybe the tenant no longer is eligible to receive it. Maybe they, who knows what happened. But the truth of the matter is, right, if you are never going to get that portion of the rent from this social services provider again, and the only thing you're receiving is the small, tiny portion that the tenant themselves is paying, well, they're not covering the expenses that you're accruing. They're not covering the rent that was owed to you that the contract said it was covered. And so you have to remove that tenant, just like if the tenant didn't pay the rent themselves. So yeah, it might not seem fair, but that is standard practice throughout the rest of the country. Now, I know that people in New York might not understand that, but they're not used to a regular rental property system where people can be evicted for this sort of thing. And they're like, oh, well, removal notices only over a few $1,000s. And I'm like, hey, man, in other parts of the country, there's people getting removal notices over a couple $100s, a few thousand. That's outrageous. If you're not getting paid thousands of dollars at a time from your tenants, well, that could put pretty much any landlord in a lot of distress, depending on how many tenants are doing it. So the way they said was, since 2022, they filed 169 eviction cases, probably the grand majority for non-payment of rent, if not all of them. Okay, so yeah, if they are not getting paid rent, thousands of dollars in rent from 169 different tenants, then they've got a big problem, and that's why they're filing these evictions. Renova is the largest landlord in a sliver of New York with one of the city's highest eviction rates. The company successfully evicted residents from at least 26 units at the sprawling 1,006-unit complex since the eviction pause was lifted. Tenants and their advocates say the 8-building, mostly rent-stabilized complex along Mill Road and Ebbett Street has emerged as an eviction hotspot due to two related issues: a property manager with quick-to-evict debt collection strategy and bureaucratic delays by the Department of Social Services in making timely rental payments to landlords. So the real issue here isn't the property manager. The property manager is doing their job. They are following the law and filing evictions against people who owe money. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. Just because you are quick to do it, the only thing you're really doing is doing your job well and doing it correctly. That's the way all landlords should be. They should be quick to file evictions as soon as it is legally correct to do it, okay? Just because if you delay, especially in a state like New York, it is going to take even longer if you have to get rid of these bad tenants. Now, they say this is a 1,006-unit property, okay? That is a humongous property. And out of those 1,006 units, they've actually evicted residents from just 26 units since 2022. Now, okay, 26 units over the course of nearly 2 years. Okay, we'll just say a year and a half, right? That is not that many. Really, it is not that many, especially considering the size of this apartment complex. 26 units represents, less than 3% of all of the tenants in the place have actually been evicted due to, non-payment of rent probably. Okay, so that means that the majority of the tenants are paying on time and that the landlord hasn't had much trouble. Of course, they filed 169 cases, right, or eviction cases, but the majority of those people, of the 169, actually paid their rent or weren't, there was no eviction completed through the process. So, just a very, very tiny portion of people are actually the ones who are having trouble. And so, it blows my mind that they sit there and they're like, oh, we're going to criticize these landlords for filing evictions quickly and efficiently according to the law. No, criticize the social service provider for not paying the landlord on time, because you're putting these low-income tenants at risk by doing that. So yeah, the government, once again, is at fault. You create your own problems, but these problems wouldn't even exist if landlords weren't forced to accept these tenants from the government. This is another one of those issues where a lot of landlords, they don't want to deal with like Section 8. They don't want to deal with government vouchers or any of that nonsense because, hey, look, you can see here's a problem right there. The government has a tendency to pay late, or not pay at all, or there be bureaucratic nightmare to get paid. And so if I'm a landlord and I don't want to deal with that nonsense, well, I should have the right not to. But not in New York. New York is one of those states where they say, hey, you have to participate in this program. And it sounds like to me that that is part of the strategy that this apartment landlord uses in order to make a profit. And that's fine. That's fine. But, like I said, it should be up to us whether we want to participate or not. A review of court records by Gothamist found tenants at Tyson's Park who received eviction notices owed a median of $4,710 each, a total of nearly $900,000. Just 13 of the 169 households sued by Ravona owed more than $9,000 at the time. Another 40 owed less than $3,500. Monthly rents at the complex range from around $900 for longtime residents in rent-stabilized units to about $2,500. So they said there, oh, only a few residents owe more than $9,000. Like, more than $9,000? Gee, like, how much do you think is, acceptable amount? Okay, do you think that landlords shouldn't file an eviction until they're owed at least 20 grand? I mean, really, it says right here that you looked it up. You wrote in this article that this landlord is owed $900,000. Now, that is a lot of money. That is a lot of money to any landlord that's out there. If part of your operating budget is short $900,000 because people aren't paying you, then you've got a problem. You got a big problem, and you have to solve it. So what do? You have to get rid of those tenants who are not paying you rent, and you have to bring tenants in who will pay you. That is what you have to do. This is a business. This is not a charity, and that's the last thing that we need is a whole bunch of customers who are taking our product and not paying us. So yeah, this is an interesting article. Shows the entitlement of some of these super low income tenants who are receiving government subsidies. And it kind of shows the ridiculousness of them thinking, hey, owing thousands of dollars is no big deal. We shouldn't have to face eviction for that. But yeah, in reality, it is a very, very big deal, and it hurts landlords a lot.